Welcome back. Now, firstly, I'm very happy that my previous video went down very well. A lot of people thanking me for injecting a little bit of reassurance into some of the panic mode that's going on right now. And I get it. Sometimes it takes someone else to reaffirm you that simply nothing has changed. Now, just to reiterate, in case you missed my last video, we're seeing a lot of panic, a lot of negativity and FUD, certainly about the ecosystems that we're involved in. People panicking because price hasn't exploded right out of the gates. To cut a long story short, my opinion is very much coming from a basis of nothing has changed. We are heading into the bull market as we knew we were going to. Pretty soon, things are going to get euphoric. Traditional finance institutions are indeed getting more and more heavily involved into crypto. Now, starting obviously with things like the spot ETFs with BlackRock and 1,000,001 other applications that seem to be going through. We knew this was coming. And then going forward, there are even more creative ways in motion to have these institutions get more heavily involved in crypto. So it's my prediction that this next bull cycle is the biggest we have seen yet, simply because there is a heck of a lot more economic energy coming into the system, into the crypto realm as a whole. Now, there's only so many times I can say this without tomorrow price action going down a little bit. Everyone's back in panic mode. Everything about patience, conviction, having a bit of foresight, waiting and just holding through some of these tumultuous, volatile situations seems to go over everyone's head, and then lo and behold, they're back to square one. So I'm going to be speaking to the folks who haven't shit the bed a day later just because a couple of price movements haven't gone the way we want. Same in the future as they go up, as they go down. We're holding for a longer term than the next couple of weeks. If you can't get your head around that, you don't have the conviction to hold through those times, it's probably not for you. Because this is probably one of the easiest situations to be in from an investment perspective. You just have to sit on it. If you can DCA in when price action looks a bit more appealing to get in, well, great. Adding to your position if you have the means to do so, and you keep accumulating while we're in accumulation mode, come the bull market, you're in an even stronger position. But until that time comes, relax. Or simply exit your position and never think about this again. Because I'm telling you, those who are going to come out best are the ones that have more patience and more of a long-term outlook. And that sounds like a cop-out. It sounds like something that someone would say when they're trying to justify that there isn't too much momentum in the here and now. But there's no getting around it. Simply holding for the long term has proven time and time again to be far, far better for returns than having that trading mentality. So with that being said, let's move on to another topic. And this is something that I feel is very important to touch on right now before we get into that euphoric phase where everybody's getting excited about crypto. Every man and his dog outside is talking about their latest coins, their latest ecosystems. And hopefully for all of you guys, for all of this community that has been holding their position through some of these tougher times, we'll be sitting on nice fat bags. Now, what do we do with those fat bags is one of the questions I get asked a lot. And this video was really motivated by a question, and I've had this question a number of times in the past. What is my advice to someone who is looking to generate wealth for themselves? How do you put yourselves in a significantly different situation if you haven't won the lottery, if you don't have a job that's paying you a fortune? Now, there is an intelligent way of going about growing your own net worth, growing your own wealth, and relieving step by step the amount of pressure on yourself day in, day out to actively go out and make money for yourself. And my advice, and let's take this with a pinch of salt, because there are so many people out there a lot more experienced than me, a lot more successful than me. I can only speak to you from my own experience. And as we keep hinting, I am not a financial advisor. I don't want to be a financial advisor. 9 out of every 10 financial advisors, in my opinion, are not exactly set up for wealth generation. Anyway, so to get right to it, my advice has simply been to put yourself in a position to borrow some more. And when you're not able to borrow because you've run out of options, whether it be banks, family members, however else you're borrowing and the rates don't look good and you're not in an ideal situation, look for creative means to borrow again. It's very, very difficult nowadays for anyone that hasn't stumbled across a large piece of money, a lottery win or anything really, to put yourself in a situation to generate actual wealth. Now, I understand that everyone's definition of wealth differs. It's a very bespoke term, meaning that every person has their idea of how much money they need. And that's fantastic. If you're measuring wealth as you should be, not necessarily in money and revenue and net worth, but more in terms of time. How much time can you spend not busting your ass and still survive at the level you want to survive at? If you've read any number of financial business books, even some of the early stage books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, for instance, while they're pretty juvenile in terms of their information they're providing, it is important to have that foundation in books like that. And so start to think about how you create passive or residual forms of income, or at least different avenues of diversification where you're not pulling from one basket. And so for many of us who are working full-time jobs, it's tough to put yourself in that situation. And there are 1,000,001 ways to improve your situation, of course, but right now I'm going to focus on putting yourself in a very positive mindset. Let's fast forward 18 months. Let's forget about the current panic, the current FUD, the current negativity, the narrative that's going on right now that we always see when things are looking bearish. Let's just imagine that Uncle Ben is correct, that all of this new economic energy coming into the crypto universe means that we're in for a very exciting bull market, just 12, 18, 24 months down the road. You've held, you're in a position where you've got your bags, whether it be 100,000, 1,000,000, 5,000,000, 10,000,000, you are sitting on a nice bag of money and you're wondering, what am I to do now? For some of you thinking that even if you're making 1 million, 5 million, 10 million plus, that your journey is over, you're in for a rude awakening. Unless you are living in a country that has a very low cost of living and you're living within a very, very below ideal means within that country, meaning that, even within those cheap countries, you are somehow still having to be cognizant of how much you're spending each month, then you're in for a rude awakening, because that simply isn't going to be enough. Nowadays, we look at cap rates, for instance, or we look at, market caps rather for certain cryptocurrencies or traditional finance vehicles. And some of the amounts of money sound ridiculous to us because we're quite simply not used to operating at such high levels of income. For some of you, 100,000 seems like a huge amount of money that you can do wonderful things with. Now, if you're strategic and intelligent about how you're using those funds, you definitely can do some cool things with it. But it's still the beginning of your journey there, and the same can be said at 1 million or 5 million and 10 million. Is it great to certainly be given that pedestal to work from? Absolutely. But the more money you make, the higher your bags are, providing you're strategic in pulling out your profits. This means making sure that way in advance of receiving your bags, you are setting yourselves up favorably from a tax perspective. You're also, positioning yourself geographically where it makes the most sense for you. Assuming some of these pre-checks are done, when you are in a position to start pulling profits because the market, in your opinion, in my opinion, the general consensus of the crypto community is kind of telling us that it's roundabout now that we're starting to approach the highs. We're starting to approach the pinnacle of what this cycle is likely to offer. Then it's time to pull some profits. And I'm going to challenge you to think about your profits, your bags a lot differently. Now, this may be obvious to some of you, but to others, it may be some new way of thinking here, a different lens to look through that may save you a lot of time and a lot of headache going forward when you realize that 5 million you just made isn't going to last you for the rest of your life operating and living at the level you want to. So I'm going to say this. Think about your bags, not in terms of their USD value in and of themselves, but how much additional revenue it grants access to. How much more money and revenue and options you can gain access to by leveraging your bags. Now, that's a pretty powerful thing. Nowadays, in my opinion, one of the biggest ways of measuring someone's wealth, someone's acumen, is just how they have set themselves up to gain access to larger loans, to favorable loans. You don't just want a big amount of money, you want favorable loans to go with that. How is that built? Well, that's built by putting together business plans, pro formas, having a track record that is built on successfully being able to take loans or borrowed funds and do something good with them. I don't ever suggest leveraging. We've heard 1,000,001 sob stories about people who have taken out loans for a gamble. I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying that once you have made your gains and obtained a decent amount of money, that you can then take to a bank, take to a private lender, and along with an intelligent, strategic business plan, with a plan that you have in mind that you think you can put this money to work for you, then that's going to set you up a lot better for success. Because I'm telling you, it's very, very difficult for you to have the kind of life I imagine you envision by simply eating away at what you have in your savings account, what you have in your crypto bags. It simply is difficult to do. And I think a lot of people underestimate just how much more work there is to do once you've made that money. You talk to any wealthy person who hasn't simply won the lottery or got, have hundreds of millions of dollars anyway. The way they think about money is very different to a lot of other folks who simply want the bag as being the final goal. The final goal should be in leveraging that bag for more exciting, more passionate options for yourself. You can monetize anything if you have the financial security to allow yourself the time and the effort to put into that. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you right now, and it's, these are somewhat sporadic thoughts right now, but it is definitely important to start thinking about that now so that you don't necessarily have to pull out 5 million. You don't have to wait for your bags to get to 1 million, to get to a couple 100,000. If you shift your mentality and realize that at a much lower amount, if it makes sense for you to not necessarily take the risk in waiting for another couple 100Xs, let's say. And there are certain projects that we're in that we are, of course, expecting some pretty monumental returns. So I'm not suggesting you miss out on them. Maybe it's a bit of a hybrid situation where you do pull out some funds, knowing that the funds that you pull out, you are then able to turn into more funds because of the options that they give you. A classic example of this is real estate. Now, it's important to note, and someone asked me this a while ago as well, in terms of what the difference is between, traditional finance people, crypto people that have a lot of experience and have a lot more foresight in how things are going to shake out. When you're looking at things, certainly from a macro perspective, I'm never a proponent of operating or trading based on day-to-day micro information that we're getting. When you're looking at overall market sentiment, global sentiment, it's important to see and try to figure out, look to the people with the experience. What are the big institutions doing? There's a way you can plot the course here to figure out which way the wind is blowing long term. Now, when you're speaking to some of these more experienced folks, they're not just thinking about value in USD. As we start to see the crypto world evolve, more and more options going forward are going to be in how to leverage your crypto funds more. We're already seeing this, certainly even in the Richard Heart ecosystem, where we're seeing platforms like Power City, like liquid loans. And there are going to be a host. We're seeing them popping up every 5 minutes. Now, we've got to vet them and make sure that they're obviously options that make the most sense and we can depend on them. But as the crypto world starts to be a lot more creative, as the crypto world becomes more and more accepted as it is by the traditional finance folks, then there are going to be ways to really build the momentum of your wealth in your crypto bags. Aside from that, there are obviously going to be causes for diversification. A lot of people, and rightly so, are thinking that, you know what, if I do make a decent enough bag in my crypto portfolio, I, as a retail investor, certainly understand that the biggest gains right now, probably from an investment perspective, or definitely, are coming from the crypto space. So obtaining that amount of wealth, that initial revenue, is probably best achieved, let's say, through wise crypto investment, right? But fast forward in terms of how you then utilize that newly obtained wealth more. Perhaps you want to diversify and pull it out into more traditional, quote unquote, stable channels. Real estate being one of them. And this is probably the easiest example, but also something that is over time has proven again and again to be one of the best. People need to live. Buying a rental home, buying a commercial piece of real estate, buying an asset in the real world. Again, there are many checks you need to go through. We can maybe do another whole video section on this in terms of how to find the best real estate options, what to invest in, how to spend your time. Something I'm pretty experienced in myself, but it took me a long time to learn. But just using that as an example, instead of getting 1 million, 5 million, just take 1 million, for instance, which to a lot of us sounds like a lot of money, but I think you'll be surprised, especially if you're accumulating your position now. When the bull market rolls around, there'll be a lot of us with millions in our bags that, may be a shock to some of you. It's not going to be a shock to me because I'm kind of expecting it, to be quite honest with you. But say you have $1 million. Now, a lot of you may take that out. You'll buy a Lamborghini. You'll spend some frivolous on some frivolous things. And before you know it, you've kind of eaten away at that nest egg and put yourself in a less favorable position. Some of you may be thinking, you know what? I'm going to buy an asset like a piece of real estate. Maybe I want to buy a house. Maybe that house is between $500,000 and $1 million, and you buy it out. You don't take a loan. You don't trust the loan process. You simply buy that house. You're still paying taxes, utilities. Ultimately, 5 years down the road even, you're going to think to yourself, wow, all I've done is create a more expensive living situation for me with no other residual funds coming in to pay for that. Again, it sounds obvious to a lot of people, but some of you, this may be news, right? What's the best thing to do? Well, if you're looking at generating a bit more long-term wealth, you want to turn that $1 million into something that's a little bit more stable. You don't necessarily want to ever diminish your nest egg. What you want to do is invest it in an asset like real estate, which means you're buying maybe, with $1 million, you have, let's just say you're forced to put down 20%. Well, that's a lot of money, right? But you have a lot of money now. So providing you can start building up your portfolio, simply putting down 20% for each purchase, you can get 5 rental properties. You've done the math. You know that with a 20% down plus taxes plus fees, the rent in the area, you've vetted this project appropriately. Plenty of resources out there in order to help you to do that. Because you've got this money now, you're now making residual income. Maybe it's $500, $1,000, $1,500 a month, depending on how good you were at finding that deal. But it's coming in. Now you've got that 20% locked in at that house. And yes, like everything else, real estate, especially in this day and age, will go up and down. But knowing an asset like real estate in the long term always tends to grow in its value. It's probably a safer bet as you're going to get within this real estate world. Again, depending on if you're buying in the right place, the right type of property. It doesn't suck up all your money. It's something that is going, you've made the right decisions to invest. But all of a sudden, as the years roll on, you're seeing that cash flow coming in from your real estate. It's not $1 million. You haven't been able to buy a Lamborghini right out of the gates. But you'd probably be selling that Lamborghini anyway if you just spent your, the nest egg you had made on those direct purchases, let alone if you're taking an astronomical loan on something like a car that notoriously loses value as you drive it off the lot. By taking strategic loans, accumulating 4, 5 rental properties, let's say, of a certain price that, using those funds, you're generating cash flow each and every month. By the end of the year, there's a lot of tips and tricks to lower taxes. If you're forming strategic LLCs, you've all of a sudden not only increased your cash flow, but also your expenses, how much money you're ultimately paying in tax. All the while, your properties are hopefully gaining more value. So your equity is growing. So that initial $1 million that you had may have doubled 10 years from now, 15 years from now. So this is the way I want you to think about your crypto gains. I don't want to be wholly redundant here. And this is really an overview, let's say, of the lens that a lot of us should be looking through. Firstly, you don't necessarily have to make the huge lump sums in your bag that you think you do if you've made enough to be able to turn that amount into more, because it grants you access to loans, to favorable loans that allow you to put your perceived business plan, your investment into motion. Secondly, knowing that you have a bag with $1 million, $5 million, $10 million doesn't mean your journey's over. It simply means that you're playing a slightly different game now, albeit a very much better game. It's putting you in a more favorable position. But don't start spending money from any of your nest egg until it comes back to you residually, meaning that you've invested everything. And I'll say everything. And I know a lot of you will want to go on a nice holiday, and it obviously depends on how much money you've made. I'm not saying you don't deserve some nice rewards for holding through the dark times. But I will say this. It's so much more motivating when you know you're going on vacation because you're paying for that through residual funds that you haven't necessarily, quote unquote, had to work for. Of course, you're always working, but the difference being that work is a lot more enjoyable. You're able to monetize your passion. You're able to invest in things that you actually love and care about, all the while feeling pretty darn good that you've been building up your wealth in the right way. You're generating more wealth going forward as opposed to simply burning through what you already made. Now, again, I don't want this to be speaking to everyone out there, because I'm pretty sure anyone who's picked up a business book is going to start to think about money differently. But just like when, someone watches a video that talks about the importance of being patient and having certain, diamond hands during tough times, they'll see the price go down and they'll panic. That same fickle mentality is going to do you no favors when you do get the return you want. You've been holding, and then you pull out that profit and you want to go crazy at, going out, restaurants, clubs, cars. The journey hasn't yet begun. It's just a different journey. You've positioned yourself a lot more favorably than perhaps you were. And now the time is to really put that money to work. So to this community, now there is a lot, this channel thus far, I intended to have it aimed towards really focusing on where traditional finance and crypto meet. That's certainly becoming a lot more prevalent going forward as we see more traditional finance institutions, traditional money, economic energy joining crypto, and the various ways that we will see that comes to fruition, not just through spot ETFs, but a million and one other ways I'm sure that I know a lot of people are currently working on and getting excited about. But there is also the other side of this community, right? This crypto mentality. Anyone getting into crypto, doing their due diligence and making sure that they're being smart about the way they're investing, obviously cares about generating wealth long term as well. So in my mind, it's always important to think about some of those external factors as well, like what to do with your money once you get it, maybe how to look for other investment opportunities that are outside of crypto, just to make sure you're diversifying in the right way, as well as obviously looking for those opportune vehicles within the crypto space, which that landscape in itself is going to go bananas over the next couple of years. Because as much as we want to, or as much as the FUD and the media out there want us to believe that, it's all doom and gloom because the SEC has decided to crack down on this, it isn't. It's only going in one direction. And anyone, you think BlackRock, the biggest, fund manager, asset manager in the world, is making the choice to get more deeply entrenched in crypto because they don't see the wind blowing in that way? Sometimes you got to use some common sense and ignore a lot of the micro news and events that are out there. That's just to get engagement. They're looking for views. Right now, in this channel, we're not concerned about that. What we are concerned about is planning for the mid-range and the long range. And what I mean by that is at least until the bull cycle, when things change. And there's going to be a big I told you so on this channel when, the odd comment that I've received saying, oh, when is this channel going to shut down? I don't care. What are you talking about? Nothing has changed. No one has been proven wrong. No one has been proven right now. We simply haven't had enough time for anything to shake out. We've had nothing come to fruition because it simply hasn't been given the time to do so. So again, maybe this serves as a really good reminder to a lot of you out there. It will happen. The bull market is still coming. Nothing has changed. The institutions, the experienced people out there are rubbing their fingers together, waiting for this to come, praying on the people right now who are panic selling because they're either very new or they're just very, fickle people in general and just panic and sell out. Some of us are sweeping up there and making sure that our position going forward is even stronger. It's a mentality you get yourself into. And if you're not cut out for it, you're not cut out for it. But it certainly helps, I think, to be reminded of that from time to time, because it's a mentality you have to keep active. So let me know in the comments if some of this other type of input content is useful to you. If that's something that generally you want to see take place on this channel, or if you want to keep it somewhat crypto or totally crypto heavy. Again, we're still waiting on some of the news, some of the creative means that joining of traditional and crypto is coming together. So we're still waiting on a lot of that to happen. And quite simply, there's nothing to really report on yet until we start getting a good look at, what's coming to fruition and which ones we should be actually paying heed to. But until that point, I do think there are certain other pieces of information that the community needs to hear. And I'm willing to provide it if you think it's going to be worthwhile. So I hope this was helpful. Again, it was a brief overview, and there are a lot of more granular minutiae to talk about, quite honestly, in terms of what that vetting process looks like for putting your investment money to good use. Also, when to take profits. We see 1,000,001, videos about that, but really that is more of a in the moment situation, because while we can predict dates with the bull market, sentiment day to day with each community is going to differ, and I don't think there's really a way of getting around having to keep track of things at that point. Until then, simply sit back and relax, because nothing really is happening right now that's going to make one big iota 12 months from now, 18 months from now. So again, I'm going to sign off. Thank you very much for watching. It is an absolute pleasure hearing everyone's comments, and I do try to get back as much as I possibly can. As I say, I am going to try to be a lot more active now that I'm back, and some of these other projects are on the wayside. And also follow my Twitter. I'd love to more engagement there as well. It's great when I see some of my videos being retweeted and sent out to the community. It's fantastic, and it makes this worthwhile. So I definitely appreciate everyone here, and always open for suggestions in the comments if you want to shoot me some ideas over in terms of what's important to you, and I can certainly look to bring some of my knowledge and experience to the table, or at least give you another lens to look through. Appreciate it, guys.